I've been tongue-tied as I've been trying to talk about today's very special guest, Ben Fuchs. Now, let me tell you a little bit about him. He is a registered pharmacist, yet also a nutritionist. He is also a cosmetic chemist and founder of the Rocky Mountain Natural Laboratories. He also works hand-in-hand with a good friend of ours and roadshow sponsor, Dr. Joel Wallach, the Dead Doctors Don't Lie guy. Now, I kind of been tripping over your intro here, so what would you like to tell us about yourself?
Well, it's understandable that you'd be tripping over my introduction because it's a very unusual thing that I do. I combine skills of pharmacy, nutrition, cosmetic chemistry, and herbalism, and the Lord for healing the whole body. And the way I look at it is it's all chemistry. It's all the involvement of how molecules interact with this system, this divine system that we call the human body. So it makes sense that I would have proficiencies in all these seemingly disparate and different kinds of skills because the one theme, the one underlying thread to all of these things is the science that we call chemistry.
You know, we've talked about health and nutrition many times on the road show, but today's kind of curveball or slant, something different is the fact that you're a pharmacist.
Right.
And yet you're a nutritionist.
It seems like it would be a contradiction, doesn't it? Well, it's not, because to me, the art of pharmacy, the science of pharmacy, is the study.
And how much of your training, let's see, I see you have a bachelor's of science degree, which is that a 4-year degree?
That's a 5-year degree.
5-year degree.
In pharmacy, it's a 5-year degree.
Out of 5 years, how many weeks, days, months do they spend on nutrition in that degree?
None. Zero.
Zero. Not even vitamins?
We got a little bit of understanding of the medicinal value of vitamins, but not really about the medicinal values of food. And it's been only very recently that it's become recognized in the healing community that these things that we call foods and nutritional supplements really have powerful fundamental healing properties.
Being a pharmacist and a nutritionist, do you feel like you're out there on your own? Are there other people in the pharmacy industry that are joining you?
Initially, I felt like I was out on my own. More and more, the power of these substances that we call nutritional supplements is being recognized.
The history of pharmacy, I have been told, actually started with herbs, actually going out and collecting things and creating
plants. That's exactly right.
Plants and herbs. When did it move over into synthetics?
Well, I want to say even to this day, most drugs are derived from plants. And even if they're not derived directly from plants, they're analogs. They're something that's similar to a chemical component in a plant. So we still have a high regard as pharmaceutical chemists for the power of these medicinal compounds that are in plants. The real advent of synthetic chemicals was about the middle of the 19th century. The Germans were the first people to discover that they could actually make analogs, make compounds that were similar to the compounds in plants. And I believe aspirin was actually one of the first of these. Aspirin is actually an analog of something that's found in wintergreen leaf and actually found throughout nature. Salicylates are found throughout nature, and the Bayer company actually tweaked the salicylate molecule and created something called acetylsalicylic acid, which we know today as aspirin, and they found that this acetylsalicylic acid, this derivative of a natural compound that's found in plant material, had remarkable medicinal benefits, and thus was born.
One of the things I'm interested to know about, for example, I had acne pretty bad when I was younger, and they put me on a medication. You might know the name of it. It was a very strong medication.
Accutane, probably.
Accutane.
Oh. Well,
Accutane, which is a derivative of vitamin A.
That's right, David.
Yet it is so potent.
It's powerful. Now, let me address acne right now that you brought it up, because acne is really one of my favorite disease states because it's so easy to treat. In fact, over the last 9 years of treating acne nutritionally, I have discovered that acne is actually a nutritional deficiency. What we know today as acne, a skin disease that's called acne, can actually be induced in laboratories, in laboratory animals, by removing key nutrients out of laboratory animals' diets. So you can actually cause acne-like lesions in animals by simply removing zinc from the diet, for example. So at Rocky Mountain Natural Labs, one of the first things we do for acne patients is we put them on zinc. And just that alone, just that treatment alone, can have dramatic effects for treating acne. See, it turns out that zinc is also involved in the male hormone system. And acne, it's known today, is a byproduct of derangements in the male hormone system. So by reestablishing the zinc in the diet, you can straighten out male hormone systems and you can improve acne. In fact, everybody who has acne should be put on zinc, and not a very special form of zinc, zinc picolinate. But there's more. That's just one little example. Essential fatty acids are very important for your acne patient. Cleansing minerals like selenium is very important for your acne patient. And B vitamins are very important for your acne patient.
You know, Dr. Wallach talks about the short lifespan of medical doctors, and I'm wondering, do you know what the lifespan of a pharmacist is? Why are we living longer today if our health is worse?
That's a great question, David. It's actually a myth that we're living longer. We're not really living longer if you factor in infant mortality.
And so here you are counting out pills, and you're like, oh, this is going to hurt you worse than it's going to hurt me. Did you quit?
Well, I gradually started to make a lot of enemies in the medical community because I was telling people, you know what, if you have chronic ear infections, then there's something going wrong with your ears. You don't need antibiotics to kill the bacteria. And I would tell people, you know, if you have mucus forming, you don't want to stop that mucus. Mucus is your friend. You want to figure out why you're producing a lot of mucus. Or if you have some stomach pains, you don't want to knock out the acid in your stomach. You want to figure out what's going wrong with your stomach that's causing pain. And I started to talk to my clients this way, and the medical community didn't really appreciate it. So gradually I realized that my role as a pharmacist was going to have to be a very unique one.
Now, some drugs are beneficial, you'd have to admit.
Drugs are beneficial if you have a life-threatening issue where you need to knock out one of the systems in your body, but only in a temporary fashion. In fact, today we know that the fourth leading cause of death in this country, after heart disease, cancer, and diabetes, is prescription medicine. The fourth leading cause of death in this country is prescription medicine, not taken in overdose, but taken as the doctor demands, as the doctor tells you to. So the fourth leading cause of death in this country is the side effects from drugs taken as prescribed. And to me, if a leading cause of death is something that we consider...
You know, I wonder what effect this instant society we live in has played in this.
Sure.
Because, 400 years ago, if something went wrong, well, you kind of had to wait it out a little bit.
We all want a pill. We all want one magic bullet. And now's a good time to say that nutrition is not a magic bullet. So that if you have a headache, while a lack of essential fatty acids, lack of protein, lack of magnesium may be at the root of the headache, that's not to say that if you just take a magnesium pill, your headache's going to go away. It takes a gradual amount of time for your body to assimilate and to rebuild itself. Yet the long-term results of this nutritional supplementation will be no more headaches. So you may need in the short term some kind of pharmaceutical intervention to get rid of your headache, but in the long term, the answer is to rebuild the tissue, to give your body the basic supplements, the basic raw materials so that you don't get the headaches. See, it's a much more elegant strategy.
When we started the interview, I mentioned at the very front I was trying to read through this intro, and I was kind of like getting tongue-tied because it's a lot to say, but I have to be very honest with you. I slept plenty last night, but I woke up with a headache this morning, and I'm thinking, oh, today's a taping day, and I've got to be plugged in because, you're good, Ben Fuchs, you're a good guest, you're a sharp guy, and I can't just be sitting here, with my head off in, my vacation last week.
Well,
I got to focus.
First thing in the morning, okay, you just wake up first thing in the morning. What happened the 8 hours that you slept? Well, your body has rebuilt itself because that's what happens when you sleep. As you sleep, your body regenerates and rebuilds itself. Well, if your body is regenerating and rebuilding itself throughout the night, you are going to be deficient in the morning in key nutrients. Just like if you took your car and drove out to Kansas, you'd get to Kansas and you'd be out of gas. Okay? Well, it's the same thing in the morning. You're out of gas in the morning. In fact, that's why we call our morning meal our breakfast, our break-fast meal. We're breaking our fast. So in the morning, you're very depleted in nutrients, and the most important nutrients that you're depleted in is, guess what? Protein. Okay, and that's what we talked about earlier, David. Most of us, first thing in the morning, we eat sugar, carbohydrates, breads, muffins, cereals, these kinds of things. Now, breads, carbohydrates, and muffins further deplete the body of key nutrients because they require a lot of work for the body to assimilate. Okay, are you with me here? Mm-hmm. So not only are we fasting throughout the night, and not only are we deficient in nutrients first thing in the morning, but then we further load the body. We further deplete the body by doing carbohydrates in the morning, first thing in the morning. Now,
Are you saying we should get away from the cereal thing?
Absolutely, absolutely we should be getting away from the cereal scam. If you don't believe me, you experiment tomorrow morning. You just have 2 eggs for breakfast, poached, okay? Watch how much longer your energy is sustained throughout the day, throughout the morning. Not only that, but watch how much better you feel, how much more energy you have, how much clearer you're thinking. Protein comes from the word proteus, which means number 1, which means primary. And that's because protein is your primary nutrient. Your secondary nutrient is fats. Your tertiary and last nutrient is carbohydrates. In fact, proteins are essential. You have to get them from your diet.
Proteins, eggs, meat.
We'll talk about meat in a little bit.
Peanut butters, protein. Peanuts, nuts.
Nuts are okay. Peanuts are certainly not one of the better nuts. Almonds are the king of nuts, and there's much better nuts. In fact, peanuts aren't even nuts. They're legumes. They're considered beans, and they're much richer in carbohydrates than they are in proteins. So nuts are another issue that we can talk about, but your best sources of protein are whey, W-H-E-Y, eggs, and soy are actually the 3 best sources of protein. Fish is okay source of protein, and beans are an okay source of protein. And meat would be a good source of protein if it were tartare, if it were raw meat. The way we're supposed to be eating meat is we're supposed to chase down the antelope, pounce on him, rip off his legs, and eat the meat raw because the meat contains nutrients in its raw state that help us assimilate and digest it.
People get sick when they do that, though.
Well, obviously in the 21st century we're not going to be able to do that, but that's the way our genetics have been designed to assimilate meat protein. So
are you a vegetarian?
I am not a vegetarian, but I do eat meat. When I do ingest meat, I make sure that it's cooked very little, and I make sure that it's something called free-range meat. Whey, eggs, soy, beans, and to a certain extent fish are really your best sources of protein. And what I was saying earlier, however, and the point I wanted to make is that carbohydrates are the one macronutrient that is non-essential. Your body can make its own carbohydrates. Carbohydrates, by the way, equals sugar. Sugar equals carbohydrates. It's the same word to the body. So protein has essential amino acids. Fats are essential fatty acids, partially. Carbohydrates are the one of the 3 nutrients that's not necessarily essential, and it's the one of the 3 nutrients that we're all eating too much of. In fact, the food pyramid tells us that we're supposed to be eating 6 to 11 servings of carbohydrates every day. Now keep in mind, carbohydrates are the foods that farmers give their cattle when they want to fatten them up. And that's why here in America we are a bunch of fat cows.
Okay.
Because we're eating the same way farmers feed their cattle. Does that make sense? Do you see what I'm saying? When you want to fatten a cow, what do? You give them grain, right? You give the cow grain. It's the same thing we feed our children every morning, not to mention the fact that carbohydrates cause a rise in insulin levels, which further wreak havoc on the body.
Now, we keep touting that you're a pharmacist and nutritionist. Does it bug you the fact that in people's minds they respect you for the pharmacy part more than the nutrition part?
No, it doesn't, because what happens is when I start dispensing nutrients, people heal. People get better when they start to supplement their diet with nutritional supplements, and really, while I get looked upon as a hero, it's not me that's doing the healing. It's actually these nutritional substances interfacing with the human biosystem that's doing the healing. As I said earlier, I don't believe that we're sick in this country. I believe that we're starving. I believe that we're missing the key building blocks that give us good health. And ultimately, that's really the goal of a pharmacist, is to bring good health.
Would you rather we just called you a nutritionist?
You can call me anything you like.
All right. Well, I didn't know. Is that...
It's an unusual thing because I'm kind of making my own prototype. There really isn't a prototype for a pharmacist, nutritionist, herbalist, skincare chemist. So it's very difficult for people to figure out how to address me. But the bottom line is I'm interested in healing. I'm interested in people's health and well-being. And I know fundamentally that these substances can bring health and healing.
Have your 5 years in the field, of course you earned a Bachelor's of Science degree in the area of pharmacy, have those helped you in the nutrition field?
Absolutely. It allowed me to understand that by dispensing strategic molecular substances and by incorporating strategic chemicals into the body, we can affect changes in the body, be they pharmaceutical chemicals that will affect changes by blocking and knocking out systems, or nutritional chemicals that can affect changes by building and rejuvenating and helping the body work as mandated by the Lord.
I am of the generation, I'm in my mid-30s now. When I was little, whenever you had a cold, whenever you had any symptoms, you just started into antibiotics.
Sure. And now we have a tremendous problem with bacterial resistance. You see, this whole issue of antibiotics is very interesting that you brought that up because it underscores the inappropriate strategies that we have with healing. You see, I don't necessarily talk about specific nutrients or specific diseases. I talk about overall strategies. So let's take this example that you brought out. You have a cold, okay? What is a cold? It's sniffles, mucus, fever, you feel tired, lethargic. Well, guess what? All of those symptoms are actually the body's way of healing itself. Mucus, for example, is the body's protective mechanism. Mucus is your friend, I tell people. Mucus is the way your body protects itself against pathogens. You don't want to knock out mucus. Fever, for example, okay? You have a fever. Fever is your friend because fever raises the body's temperature so bacteria cannot live. So the viruses, these attack substances, will be killed by the elevated body temperature. Do you see how it doesn't make sense that you'd want to take something that would knock out fever, that you'd want to take out something that would knock out mucus? So what we know as a cold is really the body's response to attack, and we want to encourage these symptoms. We don't want to knock out these symptoms. Do you see? So it's an overall strategic issue. It's an overall strategy of how we take care of our health, and it requires an understanding of the rudiments of biochemistry and the rudiments of nutritional chemistry.
This is an interesting subject, especially on a Christian network that believes in healing. So I sure don't want to get myself in hot water here, but I've had kind of the other spectrum. I've heard from a person that has talked about being with it. In other words, you have the symptoms come on you of a cold, and our typical thing is let's pray, let's maybe take some medicine, let's get rid of it. Where again we mentioned we're in this instant society that we're all supposed to be thin, feel good, and everything.
Well, again, it comes down to the idea of, are we okay? Okay, are we okay as it is? And we really have been brought up to understand.
When you go into a drugstore, you being a pharmacist, you've got the cage there of all the protected medicines that you have to have a prescription for, or under lock and key, so to speak, and then you've got the regular pharmacy part. And let's say you have a cold. Well, there are a lot of over-the-counter things you can just go get.
Drugs they are, though, and they will drug you. And the point is that if you have a cough and you have a cold, then you want to figure out what is initiating the cough and cold. The intelligent answer is to stop the assault, not to stop the body's response to the assault. Do you see the difference? Drugs in general, allopathy in general, stops the body's response to the offending pathogen or the offending agent. What we want to do is figure out what is the offending agent. Okay, it's a much more elegant way to heal. If you can remove the offending agent, then you can remove the response. If you try to artificially manipulate the response, what's going to happen is you're going to cause a list of side effects of other problems. And then you're going to ultimately end up having to take drugs to take care of those side effects. It's a slippery slope when you try to heal the body by taking care of the symptoms and not taking care of the offending agent.
So I want to know, should we, okay, again, let's go to the cold thing. Should we wait a little bit before we just go to the drugstore and get something even over the counter?
The best thing you can do for a cold is to wait it out, drink lots of fluids, get rest, encourage the body to heal itself. That's the best thing you can do for a cold. Unless you're absolutely, I'm not advocating misery. If somebody is absolutely positively miserable and they can't get through their day and it's agony to have a stuffy head or a headache, then there are chemicals that we call drugs that can help temporarily remove the symptoms. The problem is when we become dependent on symptom removal. Okay, short-term symptom removal, one-time symptom removal, okay, I understand we have to live our life, but it's when we become dependent on symptom removal.
That's what I was talking about in the instant society, in that, you got a headache, instantly take something.
Right.
Or if you got a cold, instantly take something. Something hurts, instantly take something.
Sure, and what will happen after a while is the cold will get bigger and bigger and bigger. It's like if somebody's hard of hearing, right, and you talk to him, okay, or you yell at him, when you treat yourself symptomatically, eventually your body will catch on and nothing will work.
I have a relative, I don't want to say who my relative is, and he said, well, I went on a round of antibiotic because I've, had some mucus. And I said, well, what color was it? Of course, I'm now pay attention to some smart doctors. And he said, well, it's clear. I said, well, you never take an antibiotic for clear mucus. Now, lately I've been taught that if once it turns color, that is when you know that it has turned into a bacterial infection.
Well, the color is really the dead bodies, if you will, of the war that's going on where the mucus is. So all the colored material is actually white blood cells and dead material that's being cleansed out of the body.
Would you take an antibiotic if your mucus turned color?
I wouldn't take an antibiotic, period. I mean, unless I was in the hospital.
But okay, here you are. You're a speaker on the circuit. And here you are sick, and you got to get up at 7 o'clock tonight and speak.
Well, first of all, I very rarely get sick. But if I'm sick, and it depends on what you mean by sick. If I just have a cold or I have a headache or something along those lines.
You want to pull the covers over your head. You're that sick.
Well, if that's the case, then I wouldn't be speaking. But an antibiotic isn't going to heal you. That's not how antibiotics work. Antibiotics kill bacteria. So over the long haul, 2 weeks, 10 days, they'll eventually kill all the bacteria and you'll feel better. The same thing would happen even if you didn't take the antibiotics. Now, if you're in the hospital and you have some kind of life-threatening issue, then of course you're going to need your antibiotics. But if you have a simple cold, what's the big deal? Okay, is it that miserable that you can't get out and function? To me, colds and illnesses that are average everyday kinds of colds and illnesses are really spiritual issues. They're issues of stagnation. Okay, what is a cold? A cold is when everything is slowed up. Okay, in fact, right before you catch a cold, I'm going to tell you a little trick for how you don't get a cold, okay?
I've wondered what is the dividing line in a pharmacy, a drugstore, between what is over-the-counter and what you have to have a prescription for. When does it become prescription?
It's somewhat arbitrary, but usually it's a marketing concern. A drug company will decide whether their a molecule is going to go behind the counter or over the counter based on how much money they can make either in either place or also sometimes on the potency of the agent. Most agents now that are released as behind the counter agents because it's a much more lucrative place for a company to put their product.
Do you want to address the big money made?
Well,
or do you not want to tread
I don't necessarily want to touch on that too much because I don't need to make a lot of enemies, but the fact of the matter is that pharmaceuticals are a huge, huge business. And I would encourage anybody who's thinking about taking drugs to treat a disease to at least contemplate the fact that they may be fodder in the machine by purchasing these agents. So I just want to touch on it briefly and have people think that maybe it's possible that their participation in the allopathic side of medicine as opposed to the nutritional side of medicine may be more profit-driven than they would like to think.
It used to be that drugs were created so that you could feel better. I mean that was the marketing ploy. I've heard that thyroid is taken from pig thyroid,
Sure.
So that sounds natural, but it's in a drug form.
Well, it's natural to a pig, I mean, pig thyroid is natural to a pig, and it's the same thing with these other hormones that we're taking. They come from animals, and pig thyroid and pig insulin is very similar to human thyroid and human insulin, human thyroid hormone and human insulin, but it's still for a pig. The ideal way to protect your thyroid is to have your body make its own thyroid hormone, to give your body protein, to give your body B vitamins, to give your body key minerals, so you can make your own thyroid hormone. Not to have to depend on exogenous materials from animals. Estrogens are the same things. The number one drug in this country is something called Premarin, which is estrogen. Premarin stands for pregnant mare urine. It's horse estrogen. Only God knows why a doctor would prescribe horse hormones to a human being, and only God knows why a person would take horse hormones to replace their hormones. It doesn't make any sense.
Because their doctor told them they should.
Well, the time has come in this country for us to take the ball into our own court. We have to understand how our bodies work. We have to understand a little bit about how chemistry works. We have to understand about how nutrition works because nobody's going to tell us about it. Our doctors aren't going to tell us about it, and the commercials aren't going to tell us about it. We have to go to the internet, we have to read books, we have to participate in our own health care. Most of us know more about how our VCRs work than about our bodies. It's crazy, and the net effect of this ignorance is Americans dying at a rate unheard of diseases that we didn't even know existed 100 years ago. The first three leading causes of death in this country are heart disease, cancer, and diabetes, and they were relatively unheard of at the turn of the century. And they are the result of our mass ignorance about how to take care of ourselves. And taking horse estrogen instead of human estrogen is simply one example.
Did I hear you say exercise anywhere in that?
I didn't say exercise, but keep in mind that the average couch potato is better off than the average athlete who's exercising, simply because when you exercise, you produce free radicals and poisons in your body. And if you're not constantly quenching the free radicals, and best way to lose weight, if you're interested in taking ephedra for losing weight, is to increase your essential fatty acids, increase your protein, lower your carbohydrates. If you're interested in taking ephedra because you need a little bit of extra energy, the first thing I would do is take B vitamins for extra energy and perhaps vitamin C and up your protein and up your fats. Employ nutritional strategies first, then use the herbs, then use the drugs.
Okay, a couple minutes left.